I'll just take a minute to welcome you all. I'm Nevin, I'm head of WOBA programs, and it's a great pleasure to introduce Mia Popić to you. Mia was already one of the WOBA lecturers, and welcome again, Mia. So for you who are meeting Mia for the first time, Mia is a psychologist, psychotherapist, executive coach, and founder and director of Synergia Center. She brings dedication to. I was actually thinking how to present Mia in the best way, so I'll just give my personal kind of angle to what I found the most inspiring out of many things that Mia is doing. So Mia is bringing a dedication to bridging science, psychology, and leadership, and kind of showing us the way how it's possible to re-question everything that we thought is kind of given and that we adopted as unchangeable things in either our private or professional life, and kind of helping us find a way to, in this crazy, intense times, still live and work with purpose and fulfillment. And that is my take. And I won't take any more time. And so, Mia, welcome. It's really a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you, Nevin. You missed one thing. I'm also a person trying to help myself as a leader using science. That's my, I would say, personal agenda when it comes to everything that I practice. And as I said, I prepared this huge presentation, probably more things that we have time to cover for today. And that's one way how bias works, especially the one which is internalized. And that's the topic of my PhD. When you are a woman, when you are a leader, you always have this feeling that you have to prepare too much, to prepare maybe 3 times more than it's actually expected, because somehow if you don't do it, it's not going to be enough. So that's my, I would say, personal case of internalized bias. And I will, of course, today cover that topic when we talk about stereotypes. But before I do, and before I share presentation, and I will jump from presentation to discussion because I'm really more open to hearing you. And like Nevina said, I'm a psychotherapist. That's how I see myself mainly. So I really like to talk to people and not to just lecture, because it's really hard to lecture these things. But before I do that, here's one very simple example how bias works and how some of cognitive bias really makes it difficult to have conclusions which are based on evidence. So here's an example. Whenever you are late at work, you know why you are late, right? Because there was a traffic, something happened, you had problem leaving your child in kindergarten. Always some kind of circumstances were there stopping you to come to work at time, right? I mean, I see some of you nodding, so it's pretty much like that. But when someone else is late at work, you're thinking this person is just not professional, and this person is not disciplined, and so on. And maybe it's true, maybe not, but very often we are aware of circumstances that create our own decisions and behaviors. We are not so aware of other people's and what happens in their lives. So very easily we will come to this kind of conclusion, which is not evidence-based. And we do it all the time, even if we are very good, decent people, but we just do it because it makes it easier to bring these conclusions and just work with them, okay? So today, I will share with you some insights when it comes to this topic. And as I mentioned, I will be also as personal as possible, because this is really a topic in which I feel there's so many personal experience of women I work with and mine as well. So when we think about stereotype mapping, because unconscious bias is basically a story about stereotypes. Just think about these things and you probably face them in your working environment. Are you young or are you older? Men versus women. And of course, I will talk about that a bit longer. Introverts versus extroverts. I hear this all the time. If you really want to succeed, you have to be extrovert. And then there's this huge bias and stereotypes about people who are introverts, meaning that they just cannot succeed because they're silent. Of course, different ethnic groups, but and also people with various educational levels. So at this point, you don't have to write down anything. Just think about your own stereotypes, because the idea of this gathering today is not to conclude that some other people have stereotypes. We all do. And if we start questioning ourselves and become more critical toward our own conclusions about world and other people, it will be probably better to live in this world. So I encourage you just to question some of these things. How do you perceive people who are Gen Z, people who are having more experience than you do, people with any kind of diversity traits, and how do you really perceive them and work with them? Here are some questions. So if you have any kind of association, for example, I had different kinds of experience in a synergy center that I run with Gen Z people. So some of them were really aligned with stereotype, and others were people from whom I have to learn, because they were just such a great people, top performers, overachievers. So where do these assumptions come from? In personal experience, media, culture, positive, negative? I mean, how do we really make these connections between you are this kind of person and then you have these traits? Are they, and they usually are, overly generalized, okay? And how do they affect the way you interact with other people? So, any thoughts here when it comes to your own stereotypes? I will share my story, and it may be very weird to say it, but I literally have stereotypes about women like me. Okay, so here is implicit association test. You can do it. It's developed by researchers at Harvard. You can do it for free. And it's used to really uncover those implicit biases that we have toward specific groups. It can be women. For example, I did this test, bias against women in science. Okay. So the test measures your reaction time in association with positive or negative terms with different groups. So if someone tells me, imagine a woman on computer doing some kind of research, and then it gives me positive and negative words, how quickly am I going to react to positive or negative? Okay, so it's really something that tries to target your unconscious thinking about one target group. You can do it on this link. It turned out that I do have stereotypes about women like me, women in science, which is a huge insight for me, because if I do have these stereotypes, it means that I can internalize them toward me because I'm one of them, right? So when you think about this, and I will just bring you back to these categories, but of course you can think of any others. Do you find, and I know I'm aware that I'm asking you and I'm encouraging you to be really critical toward your own thinking, but do you see any stereotypes that you may become aware now when I give you these groups? Any thoughts here? Let me stop share for a minute so we can see each other. So any stereotypes you find in your own experience? You can just unmute or raise your hand or write it in the chat. Any thoughts? Uh-huh. Just unmute
Yes. So my name is Amina Huidur. I'm from Communications Department of the Women on Boards Adria. So I should know better, but I was thinking about my initial thoughts and something negative that I might assume. And specifically when you mentioned introverts and extroverts, I know the scale is not that well defined, but my initial opinions about introverts are always a bit, are they shy? And about extroverts, are they just attention seeking? And I know it's wrong, I try to challenge it, but that is like my initial deep first reaction when I think of those terms.
Thank you so much for sharing because that's precisely how stereotypes work. There is some kind of bit of true in it. Like introverts, they're really silent people, and extroverts, they really like to talk more. But then you attach more conclusions to these assumptions, and you just make this generalized assumption or label that someone is like this or like that. The reason why we do it is because it's much easier to navigate your social relations when you know that when you talk to introverts, he or she's just going to be silent and maybe she's shy, and then it just really is much easier than if you decide to get to know this person very thoroughly and to understand his or her own world. Any other thoughts here? Okay. I'm aware this is a bit difficult because I'm literally asking you to think about your unconscious things, which is not easy because they're under the conscious part. Okay, let's move on. So, just a second to make it. Okay. So when we talk about unconscious bias, let's start with definition. It's automatic, unintentional judgments we hold about people based on their race, gender, age, appearance, or any other characteristics. So it's really not something we are fully aware of. We don't do it because we have bad intentions. But these really conclusions we make so easily influence our decisions and actions without us realizing it. And that's why this is problematic. When you think about some very common unconscious bias I see in working environment, well, lately it's mainly about Gen Z people. So assumption we see very often is that they are less committed. And here you can understand what would be the impact of it. These people to be overlooked for challenging projects, for example. In reality, what we know is that they are highly motivated, adaptable, eager to contribute, because they do like to have a proper work-life balance, and that's true. This is what we know from studies. Then we jump to the conclusion because these people like to have better work-life balance than, for example, millennials. Well, then they're probably less committed. So this is how unconscious bias really works. You see some element of true, but then you just add so many elements which are not evidence-based. You have this label, you work with it, and it influences your decisions and the way you work with these people. When it comes to women, and here we will later stay a bit longer, the most common assumption I hear is that women are too emotional, less capable leaders, more focused on family than their careers. And then impact of this is that they're usually overlooked for leadership roles, undervalued in decision-making processes, and of course facing unequal pay. We are very aware of it. In reality, women are just as capable as men in any roles, and they're bringing these different perspectives which can actually enhance decision making and and of course they can effectively balance work and family responsibilities, but because of that we make this assumption that that's just not the case. Very often, as I mentioned, I see bias against introverts. And if you think about it, gender stereotype about women being very silent, very calm, very gentle, and men being loud, brave, persistent, these same gender stereotype affects women and introvert men. because women then, if they're allowed, if they want to be in leadership roles, if they really want to be seen as competent, very often, because they try to do it, because they have motivation to be on leadership roles, very often we make conclusions that they are not women enough. Like, you can either be a leader or you can just be a woman. If you're a woman, then you're this kind, silent person. It's the same thing with men. As you can see here, very often we think that introverts are less engaged, less effective in team settings. Very often I see in practice that we expect introverts not to be good in public speaking or in sales. Maybe they are not motivated to be in this area, but when they are, there are no evidence and no study ever that showed that introvert men are not good in sale, and that they are not, that extroverts are better in sale. So here I'm just giving you some examples. When it comes to senior employees, we think that they are just resistant to change, that they're slow to adapt to new technologies. And then impact is, of course, again, missed opportunities, workplace dynamics in which they are undervalued. And of course, reality is that they can also give us a very useful perspective and institutional knowledge, of course, historical context, which is not unrelevant when we talk about business. So from all these examples, you can understand that there's always, and I will repeat it, some element of true, and then we just add some conclusions, and it ends up in labels and really under evaluation of the some kind of contribution these all people can do. So what can we do about it? Well, first thing, if we want to change the narrative, and changing the narrative means changing our internalized stereotypes. Because if you are a woman, the problem in business is not that you're a woman. The problem is that you internalize stereotypes, and now the way someone else was telling you that you're not good enough, now you're telling yourself. So if we become aware of these stereotypes and really see them in a critical manner, it will help us to actually fight them. Second element are some psychological mechanisms that can help us overcome these stereotypes. And some of them I examined through my PhD study. I will talk soon about it. And the third thing is to build a culture of psychological safety. Today, I will not cover that as much. That's one organizational element in overcoming stereotypes and changing your own personal narrative. So let's start with being aware of stereotypes. So, and here, before I show you this slide, maybe just to tell you the story about an experiment I conducted as a part of my PhD study. So I had two groups of women, and I wanted to put them in this very complex task of negotiation, because I was aware that women very often have problem negotiating. They ask usually less than they actually really should have. So I was thinking how to encourage them to ask for more. So I divided them in two groups. In one group, I said, I introduced this awareness of stereotype, telling them there are some assumptions that men are better negotiator. So how do you understand that? This one group had an assignment to write down some understanding of this stereotype. That way, I helped them to become more aware of stereotype. This other group was not aware of stereotype. I didn't tell them anything. I just told them, now you're going to play a negotiation game with two men, and let's see what's going to happen. Okay? And then after these two groups, one who was aware of stereotype and the other who was not aware of it, they were put in negotiation game, which was very unfair. So they had to negotiate with two men some amount of money, where the first one told her, okay, I'm going to take 900 for me and I will just leave you with 100. So what are you going to do? Some women accepted, some refused. Those who were refused, some of them not only refused, but they asked for more, but not from the guy who offered this very unfair offer, but from the other men in the room. So some of them were like, okay, this is very unfair. I'm going to choose different way how to play it. I'm not going to play with you. I will play with this other guy. Maybe he is fair enough. Okay. So now you have all in mind how the experiment went. It was very complex. Now I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. But for me, it was probably the most difficult thing I've ever done. So what is your first thought? Which one of these two groups played better? Which one of these two groups got more out of this game? Any thoughts? You can just unmute yourself.
Those one which were aware of stereotypes.
Okay, yes. Yes, and it's very tricky because sometimes when they're aware of stereotype, they will just confirm it. This is what we call stereotype threat. So when I know I'm threatened that these people are thinking I will fail in this task, well, what if I fail? But this experiment, from my angle, is very, I would say, revolutionary, because it showed us that when you introduce women to stereotype and when you really help them become more aware of it, it creates counter-stereotypical behavior. So it's what we call in social psychology, I'll show you effect. You tell me I can't do it. You tell me that men can be better, and just let me show you. Because this other group who didn't have this stereotype, they didn't do much. But those who were aware of it, they asked for more, and they asked from a different person. So here, as you see, I confirmed something, which was, of course, something I was very happy about, that there is counter-stereotypical behavior, which refers to actions or behaviors that deliberately contradict common stereotypes associated with a particular group. So these women demonstrated, I'll show you affect. And it happens when someone really just decides to confront it and to fight against it. And the way to do it is to really be aware of stereotypes. And one way we could do it is, of course, to have these kind of conversations, to notice in environment in which we live and work, all these kind of stereotypes which people have about us, about women. Then there is this other thing I also explored. I explored self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is very different from self-confidence. Today, if you just take a look at any self-help book, or if you just scroll down a little bit on Instagram, you will see all this advice about becoming more self-confident. I think this concept is very abstract, it's very wide, and it's really hard to measure self-confidence when it's put like this. This is the reason why I explore self-efficacy, which is more specific. It's a belief in one's capabilities to organize and execute the courses of action required to manage some kind of specific situations. In this example, in me giving you today this presentation, I could say that I'm very self-efficient in delivering this message because I've done it so many times. But I'm not self-efficient in cooking or driving because I don't have much experience in it. The reason why I'm telling you all of this is because self-efficacy is a concept that can help us to really get rid of those ideas that we need to be self-confident, that we have to believe in ourselves. All these advice which are not very useful and they're just very abstract, as I said. Self-efficacy is very specific, and there are ways how you can develop it. So, for example, if you don't have negotiation self-efficacy, there are ways how you can build it doing specific things. And soon I will give you some ideas how we can build our self-efficacy. But why at this point, this is a very important concept, because it can really help us create that I'll show you narrative. My idea is, if we want to create different narrative, we have to first become aware of stereotypes. like you understood from the previous slide and from the experiment. And then if we really want to create that I'll show you narrative, we have to develop self-efficacy in different areas. Self-efficacy in public speaking, in negotiation, in project management, I mean, whatever is the area of your work. And the reason why we need more of this self-efficacy is because when someone tells you women are worse leaders than men, if you have high self-efficacy, you will perceive this situation as a challenge. And then result will be, I'll show you reaction, and you will have this overperformance in leadership task. And this is actually what inspired me to do similar thing in my own PhD study. On the other hand, when you tell women are worse leaders than men to those who have low self-efficacy, they will perceive situation as a threat. And they will confirm this stereotype situation and they will underperform. Self-efficacy in this case is me thinking I can be a good leader and no one can really challenge me being a leader just because I'm a woman, okay? So self-efficacy in this example is really having a belief that you can succeed in leadership tasks. And because you do have it, but as you can see, it's a very specific self-confidence in leadership or self-confidence in project management. So if there is another way to really translate it, self-efficacy is specific self-confidence in a specific area. So if I have it in leadership, then I will just show that this stereotype threat is not something that can underperform me on task. And of course, you probably wonder what are sources of self-efficacy, how we can develop it. So let me give you one example of public speaking, because I see that in many of my clients who are in leadership roles, they very often hesitate whether to take some challenges when it comes to public speaking. And then there are 4 ways how to do it and how to develop self-efficacy in public speaking. First, you have to try. That's the first element. And it usually goes from some kind of experiential learning. You just, let's say, give a speech to 3 people at your work or in your team. Then you find some kind of role model. This is this second part. Some inspirational role models from which you can actually learn a lot. The third thing is to ask for feedback, because if you're giving a speech, it's really something where you want to deliver some kind of messages. So you will ask these people with whom you are practicing, what do you remember from this speech? Can you give me feedback? What messages did you kept in mind? And then that way you will understand whether your messages are really delivered in a way you wanted. So you have to ask for the feedback, whatever you do. And the fourth thing is taking care of yourself, meaning to learn how to manage emotions, to stay calm, to have some rituals that help you really manage your emotions. So these are 4 ways how to develop self-efficacy in any area. Here today I used public speaking, but you can think of any challenge you have. Very often I hear from women, I cannot do it because I don't have faith in me. And then I say, well, maybe you just need self-efficacy, because faith in yourself, it's a very abstract thing. Self-efficacy is something you can actually measure. And you can measure it by trying, making some steps in a specific area, learning from role models, asking for feedback, and managing your emotions. That way, to really create your personal narrative when it comes to facing all these stereotypes, it starts with becoming aware of it. So just look around yourself and see stereotypes when it comes to you as a woman on a specific position. That would be the first thing. And the second, when they tell you you can't do it, all you need to do is develop self-efficacy by doing these 4 things. So before we move on today, I would like to stop for a while and maybe hear some of your insights, comments, questions, anything that really stick with you from the things I shared.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like it might be a whole new topic, but are there any tricks or what we do when we fail? Like, it seems like self-efficacy is a process. So if we encounter ridicule or whatever, a reaction that is not encouraging for us, what we do then?
So when we fail, how do we react to it, right? It's a very good question, and it's very connected to this concept of psychological safety, which is the next topic. So psychological safety is team dynamics or organizational culture in which it's really okay to fail, because when you fail, then you learn. And we have this definition of psychological safety as a common belief that people have in one system, organization, or team, that they can talk in an open manner, address status quo, talk about failures. But when we fail, and now I come to answer your question, we really have to keep in mind different types of failures. You know, not all failures are to be repeated. So psychological safety is a buzzword in business today because Google really made it popular, but it's basically, it came from applied psychology, and it helped us create this science of successful failing. I know it sounds weird, but here are 3 types of failures. The first one is very simple, preventable failure. It usually goes when there is some kind of deviation from standardized procedure. Like the very simple example would be in McDonald's. If someone just changed one step in making cheeseburger, that will not be the cheeseburger that is standardized in McDonald's. And in each industry, we have these kind of failures, which are deviation from standardized procedures, and they can only happen once. So if it happens once to you, you have to think about accessible knowledge that you had, but you missed it, or some skills that you don't have and you need to go to the training to gain it. And that failure can only happen once. This is the reason why we call them preventable. So it's not really just to self-down ourselves on it, just to understand it. The reason why it happened is because I didn't have knowledge, skills, attention, something happened, and I have to find a way for this to prevent it next time. But next 2 failures, the second one are complex. That happens when something unpredictable happens. Like we can't have in mind all the factors that really contribute to a specific result. Think about, for example, Corona and what happened in that period, in a very complex environment. We learned so many things, new strategies. So these failures are really to take a look at them and change your strategy. So you learn from them. And it's not something where you should just beat yourself up, because it's really a chance for you to change direction, change strategy. So it's okay. And the third one are intelligent failures that we make on purpose because we want to experiment with different outcomes. We have that in science, we have that in creating some products, softwares, and so on. Very often, women I work with will not be aware of these 3 types of failures, and they will self-down themselves because any of them. And the way to really deal with it is to have strategy. So for example, if you're afraid of failure, you will never experiment with intelligent failures, and then you will never innovate. Also, if you are afraid of failure, those preventable failures will keep repeating. And if you are afraid of failures, complex failures will not help you create new strategies. So as you see, it's more complex than just, to give some kind of psychological tip, it's really to learn about these three types and to understand how we could navigate through them. Any other questions or insights about stereotypes, about becoming aware of them, about self-efficacy? You can put it in chat. You can just unmute yourself.
May I have one question?
Mm-hmm.
This education and the workshop is very, for me, it's very useful, and I'm delighted to hear this. I'm also a psychologist, and in that sense, and in which factors do contribute to low self-efficacy? Where is perfectionism? How to say?
Perfectionism. Yes.
Perfection is similar. And which most important factors do influence in low self-efficacy?
Yes, well, it's very related to perfectionism, of course. What really helps us develop self-efficacy is precisely what helps us start doing things. Because from what you saw earlier, there are four factors, and the first and probably the most relevant to actually get experience, make those first baby steps. And what really helps us do it is self-acceptance, which is opposite from perfectionism. When we talk about perfectionism, and today people are not aware of it, that perfectionism is not you working everything in a perfect way. It's you being afraid of making failure. And unhealthy perfectionism is this idea that your total value is based on your accomplishment. So if, for example, today I was good in presenting this whole idea, I earned me self-worth. Okay, so tonight I can go to bed thinking I have earned me a self-worth because I delivered everything in a proper way. But if I didn't, then I would just go to bed very depressed because I'm not worthy. I'm not good as a psychotherapist, presenter, whatever, because I failed here. So this unhealthy perfectionism is basically conditional self-acceptance. I accept myself only when I deliver. When I don't, I hate myself. And it really doesn't helps us to start. When you have this kind of formula in your head, you will not make those baby steps. It's too risky. Also, if you are not aware of these three types of failures, like I mentioned earlier, you will not do anything because it's also very risky. If you make any kind of failure, it turns out that you are not worthy enough. One way to overcome it is to understand that there is no algorithm that can measure human worth. Like it's just not invented. This is just something we create, and it's very often part of all these messages that are very stereotypical about what it means to be a woman today. So, as I said, it's a very good question, very complex question, but the way to make those first baby steps in order to develop self-efficacy, we have to understand that there is no algorithm measuring our worth. It's just something we invented, and we can choose. And sometimes we can choose that out of the healthy anger, not to measure ourselves the way it is presented in society. So you just choose to accept yourself with failures and to do it anyway. Any other thoughts or questions?
Thank you, Mia. Excellent as usual. How to help our colleagues who are valuing themselves only if they literally die in the organization working. And the family is suffering, and we can see it. we are experiencing that and talking and coaching and training and so, but obviously the problem is what you just said. They are valuing themselves only if they are all the times connected to the work
Yes.
and to work topics.
Yeah, this is a very good question, and thank you for this question. It's something I keep in mind all the time. Is the question I would say I live with, because I see it in my clients. I see that tendency in myself also. And there is one thing that I usually say to these people. I also told that to myself. You will succeed whether you are trying to achieve your goals from healthy and unhealthy perfectionism. You will succeed it anyway. But if you try to achieve it from the perspective of healthy perfectionism, which means my worth cannot be just decided by my accomplishments. I'm worthy whatever I do. So healthy perfectionism is I'm striving to succeed, but if I don't, I'm still worthy. And unhealthy is I'm trying to succeed in order to prove myself. Okay, so two different perspectives. You will succeed from both of them. But from this healthy perfectionism perspective, you will just be more rested. So do you want to be more rested? Because the reason why these people are so obsessed with working and this idea that their worth is really based on their accomplishments, very often this idea was useful for them because they had this idea, they achieved. And there you come and tell them, well, you should give up on that idea. And they don't want to give up on the accomplishments because they do have this value, preferences, and motivation to accomplish big things. And we cannot really ask them to give up on that. But we can tell them, and very often they're very calculated, they're good in cost benefit analysis. And then you introduce to them this new idea. So I understand you want to succeed, which is totally fine. But maybe you would even gain more if you give up on this idea that you have to die working. Maybe you will still succeed, be rested, be connected with your family, children, nature, whatever. So this is how I try to approach it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's always good to bring some kind of cost benefit model into it.
Thank you.
Any other questions, thoughts, insights, or maybe some comments? Okay. So before we wrap up for today, I will share with you one concept which is very related to everything I shared so far, but on a more organizational level. It's called psychological safety. As I said, it's a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. It doesn't mean that mistakes are always welcomed, like you can repeat them as much as you want, keeping in mind these three different types of mistakes. Psychological safety is something we can have in ourselves. Then we call it psychological security. It's based on some experiences you've had in your family, the way you were raised, in some previous organizations you worked in. So each one of us can have different level of this inner security or self-efficacy, like I mentioned, based on some previous experience. But the best way to really understand psychological safety may come from love life. So think about some partnerships in which you've been, and some of these relationships really made you the best version of yourself. They really helped you grow. And in some, you were like the worst version of yourself. You behaved in a way that you never expected you would behave. So you're this one person, same person, in different relationships. And because different relationships, you're again different because they really bring totally different outcomes. Well, that's something relatable in teams and organizations. In some teams or organizations, you're just flourishing, growing, and in some others, you're quiet, you can't share any ideas. The reason why this is all very important today is because when we do have psychological safety, we share knowledge. And when we share knowledge, we conduct things in a better and faster way. But, and now to connect this with stereotypes, if we think that someone is not someone with whom we could share ideas and knowledge because we see that person through the lens of stereotypes, we will not share, we will not communicate. And this is the reason why psychological safety is a foundation of inclusion and diversity. And because I don't want to leave this only as an abstract definition, here I will share with you, just a second, 4 dimensions, 4 domains of psychological safety, so we can discuss them from the lens of becoming aware of stereotypes. So when we talk about inclusion and diversity, that's the main element of psychological safety. So when there is psychological safety in one organization, everyone is invited. Not only if you're a woman, but if you're an introvert, if you're a Gen Z, if you've been there in this organization for the last 20 years, every voice is really acceptable, and not only acceptable, but desirable. We want to hear different voices. In this psychologically safe environment, we talk about failures, but failures are not something which is okay if men do it and not okay if women do it, or Gen Z or introverts and so on. We do have open conversation, but open conversation is not only something we expect from men, and then when women are assertive, we say no, no. And there are many studies that really reminds us that when women are assertive, they don't get what they want. If they didn't ask for it, they would get it because it's aligned with stereotype about women. Women are waiting to get what they deserve. But in this open conversation style, they ask for more and they get more because they're women, okay? And there is willingness to help, meaning that if you are a woman and asking for help, it doesn't mean that you are not capable enough. It just means that you are asking for help. So when I think about psychological safety, I'm thinking about this environment in which you as a woman can feel accepted. You can risk, you can fail, and you will not be labeled a woman who because we expected a woman to fail, like in that leadership task. You can ask for more and you will not be penalized for asking for more. And you can ask for help, and again, you will not be evaluated as incompetent because you ask for help. So today, I would say, few key messages I really wanted to deliver is to become aware of stereotypes, maybe to do that implicit test like I did and understand your own stereotypes. It's always a good thing. That way, when you become aware of it in your inner world, you will start noticing it all around yourself. It will help you to react in that I'll show you behavior, counter-stereotypical. Also, it could be helpful for you to develop self-efficacy, to forget about that abstract self-confidence, to develop self-efficacy from this perspective of healthy perfectionism and self-acceptance. Just try to make those baby steps and see where it will lead you. And to create psychologically safe environment wherever you are. You don't have to be on a leadership position to hold people accountable to create psychological safety in your own environment. Okay. So as I said, I had this huge presentation. Some things I skipped because I really wanted to hear your questions and comments. So we have a few more minutes for any thoughts, any comments, any questions, any concept which I share with you that really stayed with you. I'm particularly interested in the psychological safety concept, how it resonates with you. Amina, you wanted to share something.
No, actually, in registration to this event, registered attendants actually sent in a couple of questions and comments.
Great.
Maybe I can go through them, and if anybody has question in person, of course, that will always take precedent. So one of the things you covered majority of the questions, but one of participants asked, how do you self-advocate without sounding like you're bragging? That seemed to me a good question.
It is a good question. It's a great question. And I have to say, I hate this question. The reason I hate it is because answers are so not fair, you know? So when you take a look at all the literature ever written on this question, there's some advice for women to advocate using those feminine elements, because that way they will soften their message and there are greater possibilities they will get what they want. Okay? And that's one angle. Then there is another angle saying that's not fair. It's not on us to really change our skills or adopt our skills to the system which is full of stereotypes. So the other way is to change the system. Because can you imagine this question go like this? If you're a man, how you can advocate for yourself without sounding like you're bragging? Has anyone ever asked that question? No one ever. So I'm just being here very honest. There are a bunch of books, like Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook wrote that book, Lean In, and she was telling women, you need to ask more. You have to show that executive presence, be there, ask. Don't you worry about what others will think. Just show up and ask for it. And then many others really showed critique toward this approach because it doesn't include stereotypes and these systemic problems. So recently, Brené Brown was talking to Adam Grant. I love her. Whatever you find from her books, a huge recommendation. So she said, I don't want to behave and look like on a negotiation table like those who invented those tables and didn't count me in. So I'm aware that I cannot give you one simple answer to it. Maybe you could try to soften your, to combine direct and soft message. You will then probably create better possibilities for others to hear you, but that's not enough. That's the purpose of this motivational talk.
Maybe we have time for one more question. The registered participants. So the top actually question asked was, how do you build your own narrative that you can actively and assertively communicate within your business and even beyond? And the two most pressing challenges that registers pointed out, one was how do you make sure to fit in not only the positive traits, but also acknowledging your shortcomings and challenges that you experience along the way. And the second question was, how do you make your story unique to you? I believe knowing thyself was what they were looking for in that sense.
Very good questions. Well, to really bring this authentic narrative, you have to be aware of your values. And there are different ways how you could explore your values. For example, you can just download values Brené Brown, and then you will get a list of bunch of human values, and you just circle those which are related to your, let's say, preferences and things that motivates you. So let me give an example. I did some assessments, and my main values are altruism, accomplishment, and recognition. So whatever I do, I really like to help people and succeed in helping people, but I also like that to be visible. I like to get good feedback for what I did. So these three things really motivate me in what I do. And my personal narrative is based on these three motivators. Whatever I do, I ask myself, is it aligned with my altruism, accomplishment, and recognition? If it is, that's my authentic narrative, and I will just freely communicate it with others. Okay? One problem with that authentic narrative, which at this point I think I live authentically, is being a woman who likes to be seen, because that recognition part can be problematic for these stereotypes about women who are not supposed to stand out. So whenever you identify your values, keep in mind, is it aligned with stereotypes about women? If it's not, you will have some troubles, but you still can use that self-efficacy to help you be on that I'll show you affect behavior. In my case, accomplishment is also not aligned with stereotypes. There is this authority gap, great book called Authority Gap, which tells us that we really don't expect women to be as smart as men are. And many women are thinking about themselves that way, and many men are thinking about women that way. So that's one way to do it. This other question, how to address your limitations and some things in which you are not good, was that the second question, right? Well, it's okay to share it openly as long as you have more experience. There was one study that explored how this kind of disclosure, where you share your limitations, failures, vulnerabilities, how it affects perception of people. It affects in a beneficial way. We like them more, but if they have enough experience. If they don't, we just think about them like juniors who don't have enough experience. So be careful how you share your vulnerabilities, because more experience you have, it's more allowed, because that way you're just showing that you're self-critical, which is a desirable trait, right? But if you're younger, be careful about it, because then again, you are targeted on being under this threat of stereotype. Okay. Very good questions, by the way. Okay, any other questions from the group here today? Okay, in that case, I will just encourage you to stay self-aware, stay self-efficient, and stay psychologically safe.